So welcome everybody, my name is Paul Smyers and this is the third of my series about amazing books that will blow your mind. And there's so many of them, and I'm a big fan of books and I love to share books with people, and I try to get really fundamental subjects, really deep, profound subjects that'll make people really think. And I talk a lot about esoteric science and mystical subjects and so on, and the ancient people had their own kind of science. They had procedures and various kinds of practices and meditations and rituals that they did that produced effects. And they may have described those effects in a really way that is kind of strange to our terminology and understanding of science. But ultimately it comes down to if something works, it works. So however you define it, the ancient people often defined it in terms of symbolism and the movement of forces and energy. And this particular book is kind of oriented toward the Egyptian view of it. There was a lot of metaphysical aspects of the Hindu culture as well. But it was all expressed about the same things, the movement of energy and so on. And sacred science is kind of like the magic. Modern people think of our cell phones and so on as like we just like accept them as usual. But for some people long ago, that would have been magic. Like 200 years ago, people have thought like, oh my God, that's like an alien has that kind of technology. So technology has a lot of different infinite aspects to it, and the ancient people described the movement of forces, and they described it by use of symbolism. The Egyptian was really kind of weird in my view. That just like, wow, it's hard to understand what those hieroglyphics meant. But I want to use this one quote here. It says here, image writing as well as gestures and colors, all aimed at transcribing in a functional manner the esoteric significance of a teaching whose inner meaning remains inexpressible by any other form. So the way that the ancient tried to teach their descendants, imagine if you have some really important information and you want to convey it down to hundreds of generations, how are you going to do that? Like if we lost all our science of electronics right now, how will we convey to the future generations, hey, do you remember, if you just follow this, you can have rockets and you can have cars and you can have all this stuff, but you have to learn this particular science, okay? How would we convey that? Now, there are really fundamentals in physics, as above, so below. There's self-replication, there's fractalization, there's a symbolic way of representing the movement in the cosmos and the way that things operate. And sacred science is one book that talks about that. Now, there's many of them, okay, but I wanted to just kind of steer people in a direction like this particular book here, written by R.A. Schwaller de Levice. Now, this guy here, you'll find he wrote a bunch of other books. He was I think it was the early 20th century. He was really into analyzing the whole Egypt. He lived there for many years, and he was really precise in his measurements, and he just did all these calculations, and he wrote a number of other books. But I recommend this one here because he was a very technical man with mathematical knowledge. So what it came down to is they found out that the pyramids and many other structures around the world, the temples of Egypt and the temples around the world had a lot of mathematical implications for a profound understanding of ratios, and the essence of the universe is just math and geometry, and they understood something back then that we were trying to comprehend even now. So I recommend this book. Now, along those lines here, more of a scientific bent here, Quadrivium. Now, look this book up and look this subject up actually online, because Quadrivium was, remember, the quad means four, and it's four different types of knowledge that if you understand these that was the basics of any good education, is these four basics, and one of them is geometry, okay? Geometry. It's so fundamental. It's a three-dimensional thing. It's not just math, but it's math in three dimensions, you see? So understanding geometry and vibrations, sound, the way that sound vibration affects matter, It's a really profound thing. The sound, that's why they say in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. The sound, God breathed, the God speaks, you might say, or God, there's sounds that we don't hear. There's bats that can hear things that we don't hear. There's so many creatures that hear better than us. Sound creates matter, you might say. It vibrates, and even like a division of cells, sound. So the understanding of geometry, the geometry of physical shapes of hard substances, you might say crystals or something like that, and the moving kaleidoscopic geometry, rotary effects, the movement of various kinds of changing shapes, or we call standing waves in the universe that, like, for example, there might be a standing wave in electronics or a standing wave in the frequencies. Nature can produce those, quote, standing waves that go on for eons and eons and eons because it's like we have no comprehension of, we can only see like examples of it in modern physics, and for a tiny second we see something, but imagine on a grander scale, like the entire universe is vibrating and there's a tone to a galaxy or there's a tone to a sun or something like that. So this particular series of books with geometry and movement and frequency and the laws of ratios. You see, the so-called infinite ratios, the pi, the irrational numbers, and so on. Music, sound, tones. Again, quadrivium. You get this book. I haven't read it all, honestly. I just recommend these books. I'm interested in the subject. I've earmarked certain things. I like certain subjects that I like to go back and look at these books and get a little more knowledge. But I really suggest people get this book. Along those lines, sacred geometry. A lot of people heard about sacred geometry. This particular book, again, is one of the fundamental knowledges that we all need to have. Geometry is used in navigation and in art and in music and in science. There's cell structure and atomic structures, geometry. And the reason it's called sacred is because it's profound. It's like the structure of the universe. It's a matrix. It's just in everything. How different shapes relate to each other, the platonic solids, the various colors that are involved, and the shape. Do you know that a circle represents the feminine? Anything curved represents feminine. It's just kind of an esoteric archetypal thing. A curve represents feminine, call it whatever. It's not. It has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with a certain movement of energy. Like we have like a 90-degree angle, 45, 135. Those kind of so-called hard angles, you might say, that make certain structures. But then you have like what they call the irrationals, where they have waves where they're not like a round number, you see. So geometry is extremely profound, and of course it's used in art, and it basically makes up our whole existence and cell structure and everything. Sacred geometry. So get some books. How the World is Made. Geometry. Along this lines here, I'm going to switch the thing here a bit here. Soundscape here. I'll go through this book here quickly. Soundscape. Again, sound. All the subtle things that are around us, the sounds that we don't hear, that other animals hear. There are other animals out there, like birds flying around. They can hear things and see things that we can't see. There's dogs that can smell things. So there are other beings that we even are very familiar with that have totally different perceptions of life than we do, and particularly regarding sound, because sound transmits through the ether, the vibration, transmits through the atmosphere. We hear sounds, or immediately our attention goes to them. Maybe you hear a plane, or you hear a bird or something, but underlying on a really subtle level, the sound is actually creating over everything. The ripples in the water, the frequencies, the waves, the wind goes through the trees and makes different sounds, the way it whistles through the wind and the trees and so on. So it's really amazing. So do a little research about sound. This particular book, Sound, Our Sonic Environment. So I'll go through a couple more here real quickly. Now I'll go through this one here, one more book here in this sequence. This changed the subject quite substantially. This is like basically, again, a master of the real yoga. The yoga that you hear now about, you go in and do some positions and movements and so on in a studio or something. That's like that's helpful and everything, but it's not the profound yoga. Yoga means union. And this was an expert guy, a guru and so on, who actually practiced it for his whole entire life. And again, it gets back into our body produces sounds. You see, and our body produces sounds, and sounds are colors, sounds are notes, and music is color. And sound has a way of healing us. There's a whole article, this particular article I have in here, saved in here, called Energy Healing Therapies. We know that we hear the right sounds and frequencies around us that provide harmony. There's some that freak us out. There's some kinds of sounds like a siren that are designed specifically to just shake us up and get our attention. But then there's other kinds of sounds in nature that produces a very, very soothing, relaxing, and it depends on what we tune to it. We put our attention on a subtler sound or subtler colors. The sounds and colors are all related. They're actually people who have either a gifted ability or just it's within our possibility inward through meditation to either, like when you hear a color or see a sound or smell a color. You see, now some people have that, and now and then, maybe we'll even get a taste of it ourselves because it's built into us. But there's a real science to all the mythology and the symbols. See, pictures like this, sometimes people think of it as really kind of a strange art. But what it's trying to do symbolically is explain certain movements of energy in the body. And it's easier to do that with visual symbols and geometry and so on. You see, now let's say, for example, you pick the picture on this side here. Just look at that beautiful, beautiful radiance. It's all sound. It's all movement of energy. Laya yoga. It has to do with the movements of energy in our body. That's what keeps us alive. And there's a long tradition. I'm not an expert at this. I just love this book here, and I'm recommending it. It's called Laya Yoga, and it's written by an expert, and I find it something to go back to again and again. So I'll make this video short here, and I'll come up with some more books. Again, the titles of this little group of book reviews is fantastic books that will blow your mind, and if you learn from any of these books, I swear you'll just have an amazing transformation and understanding. So I hope to see you in some of my other videos. I'm going to make a lot more book reviews, and I hope you enjoy them. And please share your books with me, because there's a lot of books I don't know about yet, and I love hearing about which books helped people in their own search in life.